So before we start, just a few practical elements and also an overview of the agenda for the webinar. Please actually note that the information and opinions expressed during this information session are only intended to complement the guidelines for applicants and will not be legally binding. Let's just have a look before we start at the table of contents to see what we're going to look into more detail during the webinar. So first of all, we're going to start with a general overview that will be provided by Claire Castel. We'll look into the background, objectives and priorities, the Strand's budget, and an estimated timetable of the grants. Next, we have the selection procedure part, which will be presented by Jérôme Baumart and Anna Galland. Here we'll look into admissibility requirements, the eligibility, exclusion and selection criteria, and the award criteria. The third part will be dedicated to the financial and contractual conditions that will be taken by Jérôme Baumart. There we'll look into the legal commitments, the form of funding, eligible costs and budget, the calculation of the final grant amount, the different steps, the reporting and payments, other financial conditions, also publicity, communication and dissemination, and data protection. Finally, we'll go to the part that will end with the submission procedure presented by Anna Galland. And there, Anna will present us the application form and annexes. We'll look into the submission, also the evaluation and notification, and contact details and further information. Before we go into the content, I would like to point out that we have all the information regarding the grants, including the detailed conditions and the guidelines for applicants, on the EUIPO website. We'll be taking questions at the end of the webinar. The questions can be submitted through the question and answer functionality that you have at the bottom of the screen. You can either post your question whenever you like during the webinar, or you can wait until the end if the question is maybe answered actually during the presentation. The sender will remain anonymous for the rest of participants. We will try to answer all the questions, but note that all questions, including those that we don't manage to answer and those that we actually do, will be then published in the coming days on the website. So let's get started. I'm pleased to present Claire Castel for the general overview. So Claire, the floor is yours. So Claire, if you just please unmute and then we'll get started.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks a lot for joining this webinar. So a few words of background about this call for proposals. So these awareness call for proposals have been established as part of the mandate of the European Observatory Infringement of Intellectual Property Rights, which was created back in 2009 by the European Commission and entrusted to the European Union Intellectual Property Office in 2012. The mandate of the observatory covers fact-based information and research, as well as development of tools and knowledge building on enforcement, but also awareness raising, targeting the general public and different target groups. We have been developing several calls for proposal in the past. The first one started back in 2015. We had a second one in 2017, and the last one was 2019. All these calls are published in terms of compendiums on our webpage, so you have an idea of all the different projects which have been implemented in the last years. The first call for proposal, 2021, is a bit more focused this time on consumer and especially youngsters and children in academic environment. And here we are aligned with the activities the observatory is already engaging in, Ideas Powered for Youth and Ideas Powered for School, the IP in Education projects. So you have elements in the guidelines for applicants regarding those projects and links, so I will not go into details. The objectives we have when we launch those calls are actually to increase knowledge of the value of IP as a tool to protect creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. That's a positive side, but also raise awareness of the damages caused by IP infringement, covering, of course, counterfeiting and piracy, and that's a negative part of the message. So the idea is to have a common message which is also deployed and implemented by different beneficiaries in the different countries through projects. Of course, we aim, of course, to raise awareness and share knowledge, but the idea is also to engage audience and to create two-way communication so that actually in the longer term, we have a change of behaviors from those target audiences. Now, if we go into the different strands, so we have two main categories of projects we have identified. The first one is related to targeting children, youth and teachers in educational activities. And that covers academic, but as well non-academic learning environments, which can be, of course, schools, but it can be summer camp, it can be some other environment which are not specifically academic. So what we cover here are primary and secondary level education, but also tertiary education. We aim to target children or pupils, but also teachers and future teachers. So all types of projects covering those activities would be considered on scope. In this first strand, we aim for cross-border activities, but they are not necessarily compulsory, which is the case for the strand number 2, which is to cover consumers and especially young consumers. So here the scope is more on awareness raising activities, so less educational, more communication type of activities, targeting consumers and especially younger consumers. Here the activities must be cross-border and the threshold is at least 3 member states. Now, if we go into the different results we are expecting with this call for proposals, so the first expected result is reach. So we want to really increase the knowledge and reach European citizens and consumers, of course, at an acceptable cost and making an optimized use of digital solutions. As we have seen in the recent months, digital solutions are a way to really increase reach of different target audiences. We also aim to facilitate engagements, and that's why we consider also important to have partners and multipliers who can be part of the project and involved in the project in order to increase the reach and leverage possibilities to target the audience. We have listed some of them, such as consumer association, influencers, bloggers, artists, any type of multipliers who could help beneficiaries and projects to reach the audience. And of course, we aim to have something sustainable and scalable in the future. So ideally, the project should not be a one-off initiative, but part of a process and have possibility or potential to be sustained in the future or replicated in other countries. So the budget we have identified as part of our work program 2021 is €1 million. Of course, we are never obliged to spend everything. So the split we have done is 400,000 for Strand 1, educational project, and 600,000 for Strand 2 for awareness raising activities. So now if we go into the next slide, so the novelty we have established for this call is a simplified funding system, which is essentially based on the achievement of result. The previous calls were linked to cost, so they were grants based on cost. Here, this grant is called financing not linked to the cost, and this is basically linked to the results. So it aims to be a lighter administrative type of grant where we spend less time checking the cost. Actually, we are not really interested into the cost of the project and how the beneficiaries are spending the money they receive, but we are really focused on the result, achievements, and performance of the activities. So the idea is to have beneficiaries as well as our EUIPO colleagues concentrating on what really matters, which is the results and the performance of the projects. So so that's we will develop this a bit later in the other presentations. The timetable is as you see on screen. So the deadline to submit your proposals is fixed on the 8th of June, 1 o'clock Central European Time. And then we aim to have evaluation committee meetings still end of June, beginning of July, so that we could notify applicants already in July of the result, positive and negative results, so that we could sign the grant agreements July, August. Of course, it is an estimated timetable. We aim to close the whole process before September, October, so that educational project essentially could start in line with the school year. So that's a bit the overview on my side, and I would like to leave the floor to my colleague, Jérôme. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Claire, for that comprehensive overview. I see we have a question in the chat, but just to remind everybody that we will be taking questions at the end of the session. So now I'll give the floor to Jérôme for the selection procedure. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. And as my colleague said, thank you very much for attending and making time today to be with us. So here we're just going to briefly review some of the requirements to the call. All the information is already in the guidelines. It's already on the web page. There are many documents here. There are not many differences from the previous years. But for the newcomers and for the others as well, a reminder. So as Claire indicated, the deadline is set for the 8th of June. The call was published on the 28th of April. So that gives us 42 days, which is 6 weeks. It's a little bit longer than the minimum we had to respect, but we thought that giving you more time would ensure receiving better proposals, even more in light of the COVID situation. Maybe you have noticed as well that we have a deadline for receiving questions on your side, which is set on the 31st of May, and we should answer normally on the 1st of June latest. So this is really formal in order for us to put the answers online and for you maybe to analyze these replies and adjust your proposal if it needs to be. Now, of course, this formal date of the 31st of May is an indication. If there is a really, really important question that comes after that, that may change the way you should or could prepare your proposals, we would publish it as well. So keep on looking even after that date. The second point is about the electronic submission. So like the two previous calls, it is done via e-form, which is an online application. You can find the link on the web page. So using the e-form is mandatory. Exclusively, you should use the e-form. If you have any doubt about how to use it, there is a little guideline explaining how it works, but it's rather straightforward, although there is a lot of information to be put there. Final point about the languages. So the call notice was published in all the EU languages, but the call itself is only available in English. It would take too much time getting it translated in all the languages, not to mention the waste of money. Now, in terms of the proposals we would receive from you, again, it's only an encouragement. We cannot impose it on you. We would prefer receiving proposals in English. That would make the evaluation process much faster, because if we have too many languages, it will then make the evaluation very lengthy. So in order to keep the deadlines we want to have, we encourage you to submit your proposals in English. So on to the next slide. Very similar to the previous calls. We will check the eligibility of the applicants. whatever is their status, if it's an NGO, an institute, university, a public body, or whatever. They should be, of course, be registered in an EU member state, and they should be existing for at least 2 years. In terms of activity, again, the instructions are all in the guidelines. There are many examples of the type of activities that are eligible: media, social media, any type of audiovisual material, events, fairs, exhibition, concert, whatever is appropriate. COVID provides, of course. Other type of infotainment, debates, games of all sorts. It could be some tools, online tools, activities. But a reminder, you should really deliver your products through the 4 channels categories that have been identified in the activities. So events, online platforms, social media, and traditional media. Again, the activities should respect the maximums, minimum and maximums indicated for each strand. So do not go below or above, because otherwise your proposal will not be eligible and it will be rejected. In terms of duration, we have again set, like the previous times, a maximum duration of 12 months, 1 year. Activities cannot start before. We can only cover and finance your activities for the period of 12 months starting at the signature of the grant agreement, not before. So keep it in mind. In terms of signature, so it's only when it is signed and countersigned. So signed by you and then countersigned by us. That's the date that counts, the date where we'll start counting. Just a quick reminder on the exclusion criteria. So that concerns all the things like bankrupt, any violation of IP rights, trying to influence decision makings in the office of this type of activities, fraud, corruption, whatever is mentioned. So there is a declaration which is on the website. All the text is there. You should just print it and sign it. The only difference is between, if you are applying as a mono beneficiary, then of course you sign only one for you and the potential affiliated entities. And in case of a multi-beneficiary application, then the coordinator of the grouping of the consortium would sign on behalf of the other members and their potential affiliated entities. In this case, if you are applying as a consortium, your partners should each sign a letter of mandate. So that is as well on the web page. So like the previous years. If you do not respect this exclusion, be careful, you might be excluded and not be awarded a grant. So now, quick word about the selection criteria. So we have 2 criteria, financial one and operational one. The financial one is rather straightforward. If you are requesting a grant below 60,000 at that stage, it's only the declaration of honor. We are not checking any ratios or whatever. If you are requesting more than 60,000, then beside of the declaration of honor, you should as well fill in the table which is in the project form. It's in section 5.1. You should give us various financial information, and there will be calculation of ratios. Usually the ratio is 1 for the ones we're asking. If you happen to be below, please provide us as well information on why you are not in a situation to reach this ratio. We will analyze both the ratio and the information you provide before making any decision. On the operational part, we are asking very few things, CVs or description of profiles, but you provide us with some activity reports, list of previous projects that are of course related to this call, anything similar that you did in the past years. In terms of supporting documents, for the financial part, we may ask for the balance sheets, only for the grants that will be recommended for award. And the same for the operational capacity. Any extra supporting documents will be asked only to the proposals that are recommended for award. So that's it for me for the moment. I will see you later on then.
So thank you for that, Jérôme. Let's go now with Anna for the award criteria.
Thank you very much, Jérôme, and thank you, Stephanie. Good morning to everybody. I will try to briefly explain now what is the award criteria, what are we looking for, and how will we evaluate your projects. So we would like that you send us some projects that are not really too long. So around 10 pages will be more than enough. But then they will have to follow, as we were mentioning, the narratives that you have also in the Annex 1, which are the themes for the call, but also the specifications to the relevant strand that you have chosen, 1 or 2, and that complies with, of course, the objectives and priorities that Claire has previously mentioned. The proposals will be then punctuated. As you see in the slide, the projects will be punctuated up to 100 points, and they will need to obtain at least a minimum of 51. 3 criteria will be analyzed there, and a minimum of number of points will be required for each of them as indicated there. So the first criterion will be the relevance and the general interest of the project. The second one, the reach, and the third one, the methodology and sustainability that you propose in your project. So let's take a closer look to each of them. So for the relevance and general interest of the project. First of all, we will evaluate or assess how the candidates propose to apply and translate in precise terms the contents of the narratives or themes that were explained in Annex 1. In the second part, how the project and its proposed activities answers to the specific objectives formulated in this particular call. And the third aspect is how your project explains its relevance, the participation of the different member states, if any, and the added value that you plan or that your project plans to bring. So here, just let me please indicate you that even though the involvement of multiple member states is only required for Strand 2, as we mentioned, we really encourage that you propose some cross-border activities even for Strand 1, since, as you see, is highly valued and it will be taken into consideration for this part of the evaluation. Okay, so let's go for the second criterion of the award criteria, which is the reach. Okay, here we will check 6 aspects in all. The first one will be the estimations of results that you will include through the application form, the e-form that Jérôme previously mentioned, both quantitative and qualitative. These estimations need to be relevant and realistic, and accurate, since they are not only part of the evaluation, but in case your project is awarded, they will be checked against the achievements, as we briefly mentioned previously, but we will explain a little bit more afterwards. Second, that the project will clearly explain how it intends or pretends to accomplish the reach expected. And the third aspect is the reach in quantity per euro. As Claire was first mentioning previously, it will assess the total number of your estimated reach per euro of grant that you will request. The score then will be attributed according to the reference scale of reach per euro that you have in the guidelines. So in order to better illustrate a little bit this reach quantity aspect, let me please introduce some elements that are explained in Annex 4. Okay. So Jerome just mentioned previously that for the assessment, in the Annex 4 of this call, you will see that the eligible activities, all the activities that you propose, must be delivered through one or more of these 4 channel categories that we mentioned. So events, online platforms, social media, or traditional media. Okay, so the indicators that will be measured will differ depending on which one of them you use. Okay. So for this quantitative assessment, what we're looking for is the volumes. Let me just mention a couple of examples. I will not talk about all of this slide, but for instance, if you choose events, in case of face-to-face events, you will need to provide us with the number of participants. If you decide, for instance, to use online events, again, the number of participants. Then if you decide, for instance, to choose the channel category social media, and you create some pages or accounts, you will need to provide us with the number of impressions. And in case of video sharing platforms such as YouTube and others, the number of views of these videos. All this information is included in the Annex 4 and the section 11 of the guidelines for applicants. Okay, you can find them you can obtain them in digital analytic tools or platforms. So let me just show you this slide, how it looks like in practical terms. If any of you have already perhaps opened the application e-form, you will have checked that it looks like this. Let me just open a little parenthesis here, because the application e-form, as Jerome was saying, is pretty straightforward, is quite user-friendly, and you will have to navigate through it and to put all your indicators. So first, it will ask you to some questions about the applicant's identification. You will need to upload some documents and annexes that are requested. Then you will fulfill the information regarding the project identification and choose the strand for which you want to apply. Then describe the main type of target audiences and how many countries do you plan to cover. And then the channel categories of these 4 that we've seen that you propose to use. Then the tool, this is why it's a little bit long, it will invite you to complete these quantitative project performance indicators. So depending on the channel categories that you decide to use or you plan to use, you will need to provide the totals where appropriate. So in this example, for instance, this belongs to Strand 1. The target audience, as you see, is children at school, and the channel category that is asking you the numbers, the figures, is events. So here you will have to fulfill with the numbers of the ones that you use. You don't need to use all of them. If you are not using one of them, you will just add 0, meaning not applicable. Then again, the tool will ask you if you have chosen several countries. No, your activities will take place in several countries. You will then have to complete the information per country following the format that you will have in the help note. So this is another example in case you choose, for instance, the channel category online platforms. No, you will have, if you create web pages or websites, you will have to estimate at best the total number of visits that you expect to have, and so on and so on. So we have briefly explained up to here these quantitative project performance indicators. And now, if you remember, we were watching the second criterion of the award criteria, which was the reach. So after this reach in quantity per euro, the next aspect that we will check is the reach in quality. Okay, oops, sorry. Oops. So for the quality indicators, in this case, we measure the deviation from the reference values that are included in the section 11, again, of the award criteria in the guidelines. the deviation in each of the various channel categories that you decide to use is accumulated according to the table and results in a single quality rate. These points then will be allocated according to this Q rate, quality rate, following the formula that you have in this document in the annex. So you will need to plan to use, as we are saying here, 2 channel categories in order to obtain some points in this part. So let me just show a little bit, like in the previous quantitative, how it will look, what you will be asked to fulfill for the qualitative assessment. So here we are not talking about the volumes, but about the percentage. So for instance, if you choose that your activities will be events, this channel category, in case they are face-to-face or online events, you will have to fulfill the percentage of satisfaction that you think your participants will have. If you decide, for instance, to use social media, the pages on accounts, we will use what is called the average scale engagement rate, and having Facebook as a reference value baseline with 3%. So here, when you will check or read carefully the Annex 4, you will see that we have some reference values. For events is 90%, for online platforms 50%, and for social media, as we said, is the 3% from Facebook, and traditional media 20%. So we invite you to consult this Annex 4 and its glossary if you have any questions or difficulties with the terms. It's quite clearly explained, but then again, of course, if you have any doubts, you can always write to us and we'll try to answer you the best way. So how it will look like in the application e-form. So again, you will have this qualitative project performance. This is the same example as previously. So for Strand 1, if you choose Strand 1 and you decide to target children at school and you decide to have to use events, then you will provide the percentages here for the channels that you plan to use, okay? So this is for qualitative performance project. So we have to come back a little bit up to finish up with our reach criteria. So the other 2 parts of the reach criteria are first the balance in the reach distribution between channel categories. As you will see again in this Annex 4, we have or you have to see that there is an ideal reference balance depending on the channel that you will use. So for instance, 1 reach in events, it's for 1,000 reaches in online platforms, for 1,000 reaches in social media, and for 10,000 reaches in traditional media. So the projects will be scored according to how much they deviate from this ideal reference balance. So additionally, as we have just added here, if you don't use a channel combination of at least 3 channel categories, here your criteria will be 0. Okay, so this is to encourage you to use different channel categories and not only one. Okay, and the last part of this second criterion is the quantitative and qualitative measurements are really explained correctly, broken down by target audience and by member state when where relevant. So this will be kind of easy through the applications e-form. You will see that you will always be asked to provide the information by target audience that you choose. And if you choose countries, different countries, then you will have to provide the information by member states. Okay, so okay, so just a quick reminder of this. it has already been a little bit mentioned previously, and it will be still in the financial part afterwards with Jerome. But just to keep in mind that at the end of the project implementation for those projects, of course, that will be awarded, we will check the compliance with the announced KPIs, the key performance indicators. So they will be assessed through a weighted and quantitative and qualitative matrix that we have here that you may have seen in the Annex 4. And the total amount, the final amount, may be reduced proportionally if considering the results achieved or not achieved. So we will check that a little bit afterwards in the financial also conditions and specifications. So to finish this part, the third criterion that we will check and evaluate is the methodology and sustainability that you will provide us. So there it will be more about the tools and methods that you propose. Are they realistic? Are they coherent with the project? Then the added value. So do you propose new things, innovative elements, important, relevant partners that you are integrating in your project? And finally, we will check if the calendar that you are presenting us is precise, and it also takes into consideration any possible deviation, risk, and how will you manage that, etc. So this is all from this part from my side. I will then pass the floor to Jerome again to specify some financial and contractual conditions.
Thanks, Anna. I think everything is getting clearer and clearer as we go through the presentation. So yeah, so we're going into the financial and contractual conditions, so going into detail with that. So Jerome, the floor is yours.
Okay, so welcome back for the part 3 on financial and contractual conditions. So first, we're going to see what we call the legal commitments. So the legal commitments is, in fact, just to start with it on the next slide, the legal commitments is the grant agreement you're going to sign with us. So we have two models of grant agreements. You can see them on the web page. There is one for mono-beneficiary and there is one for multi-beneficiaries. Each are composed of 2 parts, special conditions and then general conditions. It's applicable to both. There are some slight differences. For instance, the mono-beneficiary will be signed only by the single beneficiary. There is only one of a coordinator if there are some affiliated entities, or it will be signed by all the participant in the consortium if it's a multi-beneficiary one, but the rest of the conditions are very, very similar. In terms of signature, we will prepare the 2 copies of the agreement. It will be sent to you by post, by Courier Express. You will have to sign first, and then you send it back to us as soon as possible, and then we sign last. So in 2021, it is still done, unfortunately, on paper, although all the rest of the procedure is basically electronic, whatever the application, the form, the letters you will receive. But it's a bit complicated to get electronic signatures still. We're working on it, so maybe it will come until September, but I'm not convinced. And then from the moment we sign, so the second date, that's what I mentioned earlier, it's from the second date of the signature, so our signature, that the legal commitment really starts, so that the agreement starts, so the 12 months period will start from that particular date. So now on the next slide, very, very quickly, it was mentioned before by my colleagues, we have this new method of financing, which is financing not linked to the cost. It's very simple for you in the submission, because you only need to provide us with one figure, so the total of what you estimated for your project to reach the goals or whatever you want to or need to achieve. Following that, okay, during the life of a project, there will be an interim report with an interim payment, and then final report and final payment. but all that will be based on quantitative and qualitative assessments. We will compare them with the KPIs, which was announced at the time of your proposal, which was achieved halfway, and what was achieved at the end of the project. As mentioned as well by Anna, if you didn't reach all the goals, there will be a reduction of what is financed. In case of extreme failure for whatever reason, if nothing could be done, we could even consider recovering what was already paid, but that's really an extreme case, but that could happen. In any way, I mean, always keep in mind that it looks simple in terms of budget, but then you should always link it to the KPI and to what you should reach. So the performance estimation assessment all is in Annex 4. In terms of eligibility cost and budget, well, this time it's a little bit easier compared to the previous ones, because the eligibility of costs, of course, is not applicable. You just provide us with one single figure. So there is no applicability of eligibility of cost. As you may have noticed as well, but we'll confirm it later, there is no co-financing required on this call for proposal. In terms of budget, so even if it's one figure, there are still some rules to be respected. You cannot exceed the amount that you requested at the time of the proposal. If at the time of proposal you asked for 50,000, you cannot come back at the moment of the final report asking for 55,000. During the life of the project, some things may change and that we may amend the agreement. That can be discussed, but in any case, never come at the end with some changes that already occurred in the past, whether they are financial or not. The other limitation, of course, is the limits we set, the maximums we set for each of the strands. So strand 1, maximum 60,000, strand 2, maximum 100,000. So we have these both limits to respect at the same time. We're asking you to provide a budget in euro. So if the currency in your country is not euro, you have to use the official exchange rate published by the Commission. So the rate what will be used is the rate of the month of the publication of the call for proposal. So in our case, it would be the month of April 2021. So as I was saying earlier, we will be, or it was mentioned by my colleagues, we will calculate the final grant amount at the time of when you submit your final report, technical and financial. So in this case, the application of a reimbursement of a financing not linked to the cost. So we look at the total value, what you ask at the time. Then we will apply the step 2, which is the maximum amount of the grant. So what I mentioned earlier, what is the maximum of a strand and what was the maximum you asked. In this case, compared to the previous years, there is no reduction due to the non-profit rule. That was something that was existing on the previous calls, but here we do not look into that. Principle, on the grant, you're not supposed to make any profit, but whatever you are doing with the amount we gave you, we awarded you, if you reached all the goals in time and respecting the budget, we are not looking further into that. And the last step, 4th step, there will be a possible reduction if you didn't reach all your obligations, if you didn't reach all the objectives. For example, if you have a compliance between 50 and 70% of the KPI objectives, there will be a reduction automatic of 20%. But it's all indicated in Article 13 of the guidelines. So you will find it there. That will be evaluated and communicated to you. In terms of payment, so like the previous years, there is a pre-financing payment. So upon signature, so again, I remind you, second signature when we sign, so when the official start date is there will be an automatic payment of 40% of the total amount. That will take a few days to be processed and to be paid. Then there is an interim payment which is foreseen on the submission when you submit to us the interim technical report. So we said duly completed. So we cannot pay if it's not properly filled in, if it's not sent with all the information we asked at that stage. And then, of course, at the end of the period of implementation, when you submit your final report with quantitative and qualitative results, there will be a payment of the balance, or maybe not if you didn't reach the objectives, or as I mentioned earlier, again, potentially exceptional, we may recover some of the funds that were advanced to you. So other conditions that apply, non-retroactivity, I mentioned it earlier, we cannot finance activities that took place before the signature of the agreement. So if we sign with you on the 18th of September 2021, anything you've done before that date, you cannot claim to be covered, to be reimbursed for that. It is, like on the previous calls, a non-cumulative award. So if you are receiving other EU funds, be it from the EUIPO or any other EU body, commission or else, you cannot finance the same activities by receiving funds from different grants. In terms of implementation, contract, subcontracting, you are in principle for procurement contracts. If you are purchasing a video shooting session or some folders or equipment, whatever, you have to apply some procurement contracts. So normally you have to respect best value for money or lowest price of what you are doing. If you are, or you use your usual procurement rules that apply in your country for public bodies, if you have to subcontract any activity, please bear in mind that these activities should be side activities. I mean, the core activities, you should be doing them as a beneficiary. So side activities like printing some things or having some copies made of whatever distribution, that can be subcontracted, but the core activities have to be yours. Checks and audits. So we are bound by checks and audits. It can be us directly checking or auditing what was done on your project, or it could be as well the European Court of Auditors, so they can look into what we have here, and they can look as well in what you have. So it's important, we do it, but you have to do it. Please keep records, keep, in this case, maybe less because it's a financing not linked to the cost, so it's only one amount. But any supporting document, invoices or anything else that would help justifying or confirming the expenses you had to reach the goals of the objectives of the calls, you have to keep that for 5 years at least from the end date of the project. Then very briefly, publicity. So once we finished, we awarded all the grants, we signed all the grant agreements with you. We will publish a short table with your names, a name of an organization or body, type of project, where it is done. So that will be published on our website. It's public. And we indicate the amount as well. You as beneficiaries, each time you will have something which is made public, you will have to use some logos, some emblems. So they are not yet on the web page, but once we are at the grant agreements stage, so when we sign with the winners the agreements, then we will put extra information. So there will be a visibility guidelines, it's a few pages, and we'll put the emblems in PNG and JPG format. So you will have to use them on documentations or banners or whatever you may use. Same applies for communication, dissemination. You have to make the best use. Any result of your project, if there is a brief or information booklet or whatever, we may reproduce it. So we may use it to disseminate further the interesting results that you have reached. You should always invite staff from the office, representatives or most likely colleagues from the observatory to attend any event. we'll be happy to be there. Keep in mind other stakeholders, policymakers as well to be present when necessary. And then the last point for me, data protection. So you have noticed maybe when you applied to participate to this webinar, there is a mention of the data protection when you registered. Our colleague Stephanie mentioned it as well at the beginning of the webinar. It's something which is very, very important at the EU level now. We should be careful on how we use private information, so your information as beneficiaries or future beneficiaries, applicants, but you will have also to apply that in the events you will manage and how you disseminate information. So please read this information carefully. It will be in the grant agreements. It will be on the documents on the web page of the grants. Have a look carefully at that, read it, because some things changed since 2019 a little bit. There are more information, more requirements. So thank you for having a look. And that was it for me. So we'll see you a little bit later for the questions and answers. And now I leave the floor again to my colleague Anna. Thank you.
Thank you, Jérôme. Well, we certainly have a lot of information now, a lot of detailed information, so that's great. But how do applicants actually send these? So let's go to Anna now for the end part of the webinar, which is the submission procedure. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you very much, Jérôme and Stephanie. I will now conclude with this fourth part of the webinar, which is about the submission procedure. So let's check again. We briefly talked about this previously. The application form, as we said, you have a user-friendly application e-form that you will have to fulfill in one of the EU languages. And even though it's encouraged to, again, submit it in English as the project. As Jérôme previously mentioned, there is an e-form user guide published already in the website that could guide you in case you have any doubt or any question. The annexes are all published in the EUIPO grant webpage. The Annex 1, 2, which is all the application package that contains the description of the project, the budget form, declaration of honor, etc. And the Annex 3, the drafts, and the Annex 4 that we've really talked about it a lot. So what happens if you want to apply for both strands? This is important. You will need to submit 2 separate e-forms, one for each of the strands. So you as a candidate may apply for both of them, but only submit 1 proposal per strand. So we really encourage you to provide yourself with the guidelines and with the Annex 4 and read it very carefully before starting to enter all the information in your application form. Okay. How will be the procedure itself? So you will first fulfill the application form. It's the only way, as Jérôme, I think he really mentioned before, is the only method to submit our project. You will not be able to send the project by email or by fax or any other way. You will receive an email acknowledging the receipt of the submission. It's important to keep this email as it has a project response ID number. So you really need to save it as a proof of submission. So normally when you have sent the application form, you will not be able to modify any element or any figures or numbers that you will provide unless the office may request you to clarify certain aspects, or there may have been some mistakes, technical mistakes or something like that. And just a little recommendation, as always, please do not wait until the last day to submit your application so that you will be admissible for the call. So what will happen next? So once you have submitted your project, there will be an evaluation committee, as we said, in the end of June. And this evaluation committee will check all the previous aspects that we mentioned, the eligibility, exclusion, selection, award criteria. Then there will be a ranking list of all the projects. And if some funds may remain from one strand, we will be able to perhaps reallocate them to the other strand. There will be a reserve list just in case some award project may withdraw. And of course, just as always, note the award in this phase or in this call doesn't mean that you will have the right to be awarded in a next call. Then once the award decision is signed, you will be notified. How? By email. And even the unsuccessful applicants will receive also by email a letter stating the reasons for the negative decision. So the selected proposals, projects, as we said, they will be published. There will be a list of selected proposals and also a compendium, which is a little bit bigger. It's a brief explanation of the projects, and will be public and published in the EUIPO grants page. So just a last slide to remind you that in case you need more information, we are here to help you. And we have this frequently asked questions section in the EUIPO grants webpage. This information session webinar will be recorded. So in case you may know somebody that was not able to attend, he will or she will be able to take a look. And then you can also write to us to this email, grants@euipo-europa.eu, for any other question, practical or technical, that you may have. So don't hesitate if something was not clear for you. We are all here to answer you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. That was very complete. We have quite a number of questions already. So if we just dive directly into the questions, and we'll take them by order. As Anna's mentioned, we will publish everything on the website afterwards. So we'll try and answer, as I said before, all the questions now, but anything that we cannot answer, and also anything that we do answer, we will provide on the website for you to look at afterwards. So let's start with the first one. We have here a question on Strand. So for Strand 1, can a project be intended only for children, or does it have to cover all the targets described? So also youth plus teachers, etc. Claire, if you could answer this one for us, maybe?
Yes, so you don't need to target all the target audience. So if you want to address only children for Strand 1, this is fine.
Great, thank you, Claire. Second one, we have here a question. Is it possible to know the percentage of approved projects in the previous call? Claire, maybe you'd like to take that one as well.
Yes. So for the last one in 2019, we had 1/3 of the projects which were awarded compared to those who were submitted. So we had 13 projects awarded for 42 eligible submitted proposals. We had a bit less in the previous calls, but more or less this is the range.
Okay, thank you, Claire. The next few questions I'll group together, and I think maybe Jérôme can take these ones. So the first one, can a public institution registered in a non-EU country, for example, Georgia, participate in this call? Grouped together with another few questions. So are partner countries eligible to participate in this project? Is there a maximum number of countries that we can involve? Partner countries, can they have less than the minimum 3 years of relevant experience? So Jérôme, over to you.
Okay, so in terms of these questions, one was about non-EU public institution participating. Unfortunately, they are not eligible for this call for proposal, which is limited exclusively to EU member state organizations. Please note that for non-EU, so in particular Georgia, in this case, there are other instruments available in the EU. You should check all the external actions. You could go to the EuroPaid webpage. There you will find funding. There should be a tab about funding, and they explain the different projects they run. and there might be similar call for proposals in other parts of the world. Partner countries, so if I understand, I mean, bodies from other partner countries, there is no maximum. Okay, there is the limitation in Strand 2 with a minimum of 3, that's correct. But there is no limit. I mean, if you want 5, 6, it's up to you. In terms of the experience of the 3 years, in this case, we look at the consortium, at the group itself. So if one has it, that's sufficient. The other members do not need to have it.
Okay, Jérôme, thank you for that. The next question, maybe Claire can take this one. Can the proposal cover dissemination in a specific member state only?
Okay, so here it would depend if you apply for Strand 1 or Strand 2. So for Strand 1, you can have only one country. So you would need to disseminate in that country. For Strand 2, if you need to have minimum 3 countries, keeping in mind it's an awareness grant, so you would need to somehow disseminate in the other countries. Otherwise, you have an imbalance between the different countries. So dissemination, meaning that considering it's an awareness grant, you have to reach or to target your activities to reach maximum number of people in the different countries you are targeting. So it is implied that you have to cover all the countries you have identified.
Thank you, Claire. Next question. The size of the target audience, for example, students, is limited in a relatively small country, thus the reach is not unlimited. Can this be compensated with reaching the target group multiple times, for example, with number of views? Claire, would you like to take this question, please?
Yes, I can take that one also. So, of course, the size of the target audience, number of students in a country or population in a country is fixed. But of course, the reach is a different metrics, and it aggregates as well different figures, and the type as well, number of time the target audience is reached. So if you reach several times the same people, it counts all this time. So of course it can be unlimited theoretically, the reach.
Okay, thank you. So let's go on to the next question. Activities must be cross-border and involve several EU member states to be implemented in at least 3 member states. Does it mean that, for example, in a mono-beneficiary project, we can realize social media campaigns in at least 3 member states to comply with the criteria? So who would like to take this question? I'm asking all my panelists. Claire, maybe?
I can take that one. I mean, under the control of Jérôme, the mono-beneficiary grant is basically that the applicant applies on behalf of all the partners and affiliated partners. But depending on the strand, if they are in Strand 2, they would need to deploy the activity in at least 3 countries. So, the reach will be calculated in the 3 countries.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Now we've got one about documents. So at the interim and at the end of the project, what financial documents do we need to submit? Invoices, receipts? Jérôme, maybe, should I give this question to you?
Yes, so very, very easy, as we mentioned during the presentation. For financing not linked to the cost, there is no supporting document, financial supporting document to be provided at that stage. We don't ask for it. There is just the request for payment that will come with the results, but no supporting documents are required at that stage. However, as I said, we might be audited, you might be audited, so you have to keep these documents for a few years, 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Another question about documents. Supporting documents to access the applicant's eligibility. Should they be translated into English? Jérôme, could you maybe answer that one for us?
Okay, so here, very, very simple and complicated. So about your eligibility, if it's the registration or legal documents stating the existence, no, you don't have to translate them in principle. However, if you can, that will help. but will not ask for an official translation with an apostille or being legally approved. So we're happy to get a copy of the original document if you can provide us as well with a translation in English, but it's not mandatory, but preferred.
Okay, thank you. Anna, a question for you. Can the project cover only one narrative?
So yes, in principle, they really need to follow the narratives, one or two or more. And but then again, as we explained, it needs to also respect the specifications for the strand they choose and comply with the objectives and the priorities. So combining all the three elements if possible.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Must the people involved in the project be directly employed by the beneficiary? So who would like to take this question? Jerome, maybe?
If nobody wants to jump in, no. No. They don't have to be employed directly by the beneficiary. I mean, it could be a partner, or it could be some students just take the role of an expert or whatever, but they don't have to be directly employed. However, if there is a link with the people working on your project, there should be some kind of contract between you and these people, even if it's temporary or if it's an agreement or something, but that's more a legal aspect within the country where you work, but for us, no.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you. Next question. Could a library take the role of a school for children not in school?
I can take that one, maybe. I guess this is related to Strand 1 education project. So of course, if the library is putting in place activities in line with the scope of Strand 1, in theory, it could be eligible.
Okay, thank you. This one I think has maybe been answered, but let's take it again. Activities must be cross-border and involve several EU member states to be implemented in at least 3 member states.
That's for Strand 2.
Yes, this for Strand 2.
Okay, yes. Next question about Strand 2 and the participation of 3 member states. How is the activity of each member state to be balanced respective of the leader country? i.e. the leader country promotes activities in 3 different channels. So what are the minimum activities the partners have to implement? We've got a few elements there. If you'd like to take that one on. So I'm not sure if we maybe need a bit of time to identify the different elements in this question.
Yes,
but
I would just perhaps say that there's not like a minimum of activities that each partner will have to do, but then as long as you clearly specify who will do what and in which countries you are doing your activities, and then you present us the figures and the numbers that you estimate for the reaches in each of these countries.
Okay, thank you. And just as a reminder to everybody listening, we will be posting, as we mentioned at the beginning, all the questions and answers afterwards on the website. So next question. In case of mono beneficiary, must the partners sign only the letter of mandate and not the declaration of honor? Jerome, maybe?
So here there is a bit of mix-up. If it's a mono beneficiary case, it's the applicant, future beneficiary, and some potential affiliated entities. We are not in a partnership here. So if it's a mono beneficiary, so applicant and potential affiliated entities, only him signs the declaration on his behalf and on behalf of the affiliated entities. For a multi-beneficiary, so it's a grouping, it's a consortium, all the members will be identified in the grant agreement. In this case, each partner in the consortium, in the grouping, must sign the declaration on honor, and all the partners must each sign the letter of mandate.
Okay, thank you. So next question. Under this grant, is it possible to develop an existing project that we are implementing and has proved successful? Who would like to take this question? Do we have a clear answer, or do we want to maybe consider this and post on the website?
I'm not sure, Jerome, perhaps you want to correct me, but from my understanding is that the projects need to start once the award has been signed. So if they mean that the project has been going on already, Jerome, I would say no, but
yeah, as we mentioned, as you just said, I mean, if it's a project which is underway, okay, if you started before something, but we don't pay for it, why not? We will only pay the part, but now if it's a repetition of a previous project from last year or 2 years ago that was successful and you want to repeat it, for me, it's more for my colleagues to say if it's appropriate or not. In terms of procedure, for us, it's fine. We could finance it. Now, in terms of idea, if it makes sense or not, if it's covered under the scope, that's something my colleagues should answer. But procedure part, agreement part, it would be possible. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So next question. If a project under Strand 1 applies for a maximum grant, 60,000 euros, how many people does it have to reach to get the maximum score for reach? 15 points?
I think this we cannot really answer because it's a competitive call for proposals. So I would say the maximum reach you can achieve with that amount of money is welcome. I mean, it's a grant based on results and performance. So that would depend. I mean, we are not fixing a maximum.
Okay, thank you, Claire. The next question is similar to one we've answered in a slightly different way though. Can a proposal ask for a continuation of activities that started through a previous grant? It's already been brought up in the previous question, so I think it's, I don't know if you want to add anything, but we can maybe consider that one answered, no? So let's go to the next question. In the case of school projects, the summer break matters. Course. So the project should start and end with the school year. Continuity is also important. So for what period is the grant awarded? January to December or September to August? So who's taking that question about the summer break?
I
the
think
timings.
I think we can answer that, and this is linked with the timeline we have shared before. We aim to sign the grant agreement in September. Exactly to take this into account so that we can start the project in September with the school year and finish in August, so that we don't have the gap of the summer break, at least for the Strand 1.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next question. Can a member of the consortium be non-EU?
Okay, so just a bit of clarification. As we said earlier, applicants have to be from an EU member state. That's clear. Now, if it's a multi-beneficiary, that's clear because all the partners in the consortium will have to sign the grant agreements, and they can only be EU members. Now, case of a mono-beneficiary with affiliated entities, thinking of maybe it's not applicable in this one, but something like the Red Cross, International Confederation of Red Cross. If you are getting something from the headquarters in Switzerland, but they do not appear as beneficiary of the grant, but they're just bringing some support to the organization of the grant, that's possible.
Okay,
and it's
thank
an
you.
affiliated entity. It shouldn't, the partner, if it's a partner, shouldn't, if it's non-EU, shouldn't appear in the grant agreement, so it shouldn't appear in the proposal.
Okay, and then we'll take the clarification of the question that came through also, is that if there are two consortium members, can one of them be non-EU?
No, in this case, if it's so it would be a multi-beneficiary with identified partners in the consortium. All of them would sign the grant agreement, so the eligibility applies to all the members. So they all have to be EU members.
Okay, thank you. That's clear. So next question. Is it mandatory to fulfill this, and what does it exactly mean? And this is official involvement of institutional actors such as a Ministry of Education or other relevant policymakers or stakeholders to approve the program and disseminate it. So again, the official involvement of institutional actors such as a Ministry of Education or other relevant policymakers or stakeholders to approve the program and disseminate it. So is it mandatory to actually fulfill this?
I would say yes. Let's jump into that one. I would say yes, because if we aim for an educational project in schools, you would need to have some kind of endorsement from the ministry or from the curriculum organizations of the academic institution. So and that makes as well the program consistent and credible. So I would say yes.
Okay, thank you. Another question we have here was a comment. So thanks for all the information. You're very clear. That's great. If we may ask, would you consider a proposal in continuity in order to take profit from previous proposals approved, so from 2019, results and visibility among the target, or would you prefer a new innovative proposal? Well, I think we've addressed also that about the previous proposals. If you want to maybe mention something else about this particular question. But otherwise,
for me, it was, I mean, I hope it was clear before. If it's a continuation, possibly, but we cannot finance what was done before. If it's a repetition of a previous project, in terms of procedure, legally, it's acceptable. In terms of scope and objectives and the technical part, up to my colleagues to say if it's applicable or if it should be an original project.
Okay, I think as you say, it's clear with the answer before. Of course, all these questions maybe came in at a similar timing. So let's go over to the next question. International project, what is the time frame? Will there be a designated person to call, talk about international filing, get help? Anna, would you like to take that about queries? I mean, you mentioned that there is a specific mailbox if anybody had any queries. Sure. I don't know if there is a specific reference, as is a specific reference to international projects. Maybe if there's some more clarification.
No, if they have some questions at this stage, they have to contact us through the email that is provided in the slide. So it's the grants @EUIPO Europa.eu. So we can ask them, we can answer to all of the questions, whether they are technical or I don't exactly know what they mean by international filing, but we could provide them all the help that they need.
Thank you. Yes, that's clear. So another question we have here, if we decide to promote our project activities through an external media, so television, radio, website, influencers profile, for example, instead of creating a project site, does this still count towards the reach?
I can take that. The short answer is yes. You don't need specifically to create a project site. The only caveat here is that you would be able to measure carefully the reach based on this external media activity, and you would get the reach based on that activity. So as long as you can measure and capture the results, it's fine for us.
Okay, thank you. We have a question here that is, what is the nature or scope of the endorsement of public bodies in Strand 2 category? Bearing in mind there are listed some categories, including stakeholders. Is there a hierarchy? Are the stakeholders including schools or other institutions, such as affiliations? So nature or scope of the endorsement of public bodies. Do we have an answer for this?
Yeah, I think here it can be as you manage to formalize it. It can be a letter, it can be an MOU, it can be any sign that you have some kind of endorsement from an organization to decide to work on certain things. And anyway, at the end of the project or at midterm, if you can prove that this partner has been involved in the results or putting their logo on the activities or whatever, that would be also acceptable. Here again, we are based on this grants based on results, so only results would matter in the end.
Okay, so a question here, maybe for Jérôme, as it's regarding the financial part. How do we decide on the amount of the grant that we will apply for? Is it completely up to us to set the required amount?
Yeah, it's up to you to set the required amount. I mean, what you were doing in the previous years, if you already participated, or what you would be doing in any case, if for yourself, you would do a budget. I mean, how many persons for roughly how many days or weeks or months, what would be the costs of publishing or making a video or participating to an event and having some banners. I mean, you would have to do this calculation. The difference is that this time we are not interested into the calculation, into the details. We don't want them. We just want the total amount that you have to give us, and then it's up to us at the time of the evaluation to reconcile the objectives you intend to reach with the budget you say is necessary to reach them. So no detail is required. It's up to you to set it like it was in the previous calls. I mean, within the limits, the margins that are set in the guidelines. But yeah, up to you, and no details required.
What we can add maybe is that, as was the case in the past, some beneficiaries, they had other source of funding. So they had national funding from ministries, from other partners, and they just wanted a limited amount of funding from us. So you are free to adjust what you ask as a grant according to your objectives and the other fundings you might have.
Okay, Jérôme.
Just to add one thing on what Claire just said, we mentioned it, I mentioned it during the presentation. The co-financing obligation is not required under this call. So it was mandatory before, now it is not any longer.
Okay, that's clear, thank you. The next question on intellectual property. So who owns the IP of the project? Jérôme, would you like to take this one?
Okay, so Claire or Anna, correct me if we are not on the same line. In principle, for grants, the beneficiary owns the results. But in this case, I think we ask them to share with them and to allow us to disseminate or distribute further the results of the project.
And then they will need to, as we said, put the logos, the emblems, and respect the visibility guidelines for all the activities that are financed with these grants.
Yes, I confirm. I mean, the beneficiary owns the IP of the project, but the office has a unlimited license to use the result, disseminate it, promote it as we see fit everywhere.
Okay, thank you, Claire. The last question, unless we have anything else coming in the next minute or so, we have a question on the content. So could the content of original existing materials be used in a new project, so events, or to be delivered in a different way, such as videos? Claire, maybe would you like to take this one?
So it's a question about the reuse of existing materials. Can we recycle existing things from previous project and embed them in this new project? In principle, if I would say yes, so I would be tempted to say yes. Of course, that would be depending if there is something new, so that it's an extra performance, an extra result, different channels, put in different ways and different. I would say yes in principle, but we have to see depending on the merits of the proposals and how it is explained and how it is used in the balance of the activities.
Okay, thank you, Claire. We don't have any more questions in the question and answer box, so I think it's now time to wrap up. To thank the panelists. Thank you, Jerome. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Claire. Maybe just remind participants again that we will have all the questions, as we said, posted on the questions and answers, of course, are posted on the website in the coming days. All the information is there on the website. You have the email address where you can send us questions. The deadline for requesting any clarification from the office is the 31st of May, and the last date on which the office is obliged to provide clarifications is the 1st of June. And remember, I know it's been said in the presentation, please don't leave things until the last moment, but the deadline for the submission of applications is the 8th of June at 1 p.m. Central European Time. So with this, I think we can wrap up and say thank you to all the participants who have followed the webinar. Thank you again to the panelists, and I hope everything was very useful for you all. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you
Goodbye.
very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.